Hey guys, Pastor Darvin here from Mission Lakewood Church, coming to you with our Monday, Wednesday, Friday morning devotions. And today we're looking at a passage from First Thessalonians chapter 4, starting in verse 9. But a touch of context before we jump in. This is a letter being written by Paul to a church that he had just started a few months before, but he'd gotten kicked out of the city of Thessalonica. In the first three chapters, he's really just encouraging them. You know, they're brand new believers and they're already being persecuted for their faith. So he's like, hey, here's how you're doing an awesome job and you're loving others well. And I really wish I could be with you. And I love you guys. And I want to pray for you guys. And then in the beginning of chapter 4, what we looked at last time in our devotions, is that he changed gears and he actually gently corrected them. He talked all about holiness, about this idea of becoming more like God is holiness, and how they weren't quite living up to that in a few different ways. And so he's for context, we've got to remember, he's just talked about holiness. In fact, in the beginning of chapter 4, he says, we instructed you how to live. So he had made this shift earlier in the book from just encouraging them to now he's talking about how to actually live. How do you live? How do you live this Christian life? And the first point was be holy, right? Become more like God. Avoid certain things, do others. There's a Christian ethic, a way to live. It matters how you live. Be holy. And now he's going to go back to something he's talked about a number of times. Here's where our passage starts for today. Verse 9. Now about your love for one another, we do not need to write to you, for you yourselves have been taught by God to love each other. And in fact, you do love all of God's family throughout Macedonia. Yet we urge you, brothers and sisters, to do so more and more. So this is the fourth time that he is now complimenting their love for others. He's kind of going overboard, right? But he's repeating it so that they know how central it is, how important it is to love others. And he's repeating himself in some of the basic language he's even using. I mean, here he said, we urge you, brothers and sisters, to do so more and more. Love others more and more. Well, verse 12 of chapter 3 said, may the Lord make your love increase and overflow for each other. More and more. Same exact idea. And here he said, in fact, you do love all of God's family throughout Macedonia. Well, back in chapter 1 in verse 7, he said, you have become a model to all the believers in Macedonia. So this has been a huge theme. Love. You've got to love other people. It's how you see them come to faith. It's how you live. So how do you live? Well, first, you're holy. You move towards holiness. Second, you love others. And they had loved others in their church. They had loved others in their city of Thessalonica. And they had loved others in their region, the Greek region of Macedonia. And now he's going to shift. All right, so number 1, holiness. Number 2, love. Now number 3 is he's going to talk about just living a good life. He says this in verse 11. Make it your ambition to lead a quiet life. You should mind your own business and work with your hands, just as we told you. So now he's just talking about living a good life, right? I mean, there are certain ways to live that regardless of what you believe in the world, there's a lot of beliefs. There's certain things in life that are pretty universal, that you're just a good, decent person if you're doing them, and you're not a good, decent person if you're not. People don't want to be around you. And it doesn't even matter where, how, or when you live. It's just if you don't do these things, if you're not a good, decent person, people aren't going to respect you. Right? So what are these ways to live that good, decent life? Well, there's 3 he gives us. The first is to lead a quiet life. Now, a better translation would probably say a peaceful life. The idea isn't that you don't talk to others about your faith, that's somehow quiet or peaceful. No, it means you're not going out and creating totally unnecessary conflicts. You know those people, right? Don't do that. Don't just create conflicts with people. It's completely unnecessary. It's not living a good, quiet, decent life. Don't do that. So live this quiet, peaceful life, number 1. Number 2, mind your own business. He says you should mind your own business. It doesn't mean you shouldn't get involved in other people's lives in a good way, but you probably know what he means, right? Like, don't gossip, don't meddle in other people's lives, don't insert yourself into situations where you can't help and you're just going to make things more complicated. Like, mind your own business. Be a good, decent person, right? Others will see that. And then third, how do you live a good, decent life? Well, he says, work with your hands just as we told you. Now, he's not saying only manual labor, work with your hands, although we should probably respect that a little more in our society based only on this verse, if nothing else. But he's just saying, hey, work, okay? Everybody can respect some good work ethic. Go to work. Now, there's also this funny little thing that was going on in some of these believers in Thessalonica, where they thought that Jesus, when Paul had told them that Jesus was coming back for them to recreate the world, they thought he meant like tomorrow, right? Like really soon. In fact, even though he says that to get to work in this book, it's still an issue. And so in the next letter he writes them, 2 Thessalonians, we read in 3:11, he says, we hear that some among you are idle and disruptive. They're not busy, they're busybodies. So he's saying, no. Jesus isn't coming like tomorrow, so don't quit your day job. And some of them heard Jesus was returning. They went in and said, see ya, not even giving my 2 weeks, I'm done. He's like, no, go back to work. Okay, so how do you live a good, decent life that everybody can see? Well, you live a peaceful, quiet life. You mind your own business, and you have good work ethic. Everybody can see those things, and people around you notice, right? And anyone can respect a good work ethic. Anyone can respect, living a quiet, peaceful life. Anybody can respect you minding your own business. These are things that everyone's going to see in your life and respect. Okay, so back up a bit. Whole section here, starting in the beginning of verse 4, or chapter 4 that we looked at last time. How to live. Be holy, love others, live a good, decent life. How should we live? Be holy, love others, live a good, decent life. Why? Why does that matter? Really, what's the purpose of it? Why does it matter to live a holy, loving, good life? Well, verse 12, and I love this verse, so that your daily life may win the respect of outsiders, and so that you will not be dependent on anybody. I love that. Now, outsiders just means those who are outside the faith. Those who are outside the church, those who do not know Jesus. That's what he means by outsiders. Why should we live a holy, loving, good life? So that your daily life may win the respect of outsiders. I love this. The point of a lot of what he's been talking about in 1 Thessalonians is that you've got to get out there and live in such a way that it's compelling to other people so they see your faith and they come to faith. I mean, multiple times now, he's complimented them not just for how they love each other in the church, but how they love their city and their region of Macedonia. So this is the whole point, that you would live such a holy, such a loving, such a good life that others would see your life and they would respect it. And they'd be compelled to figure out why you live that way, and they would respect it so much that they would be compelled ultimately to also come to faith in Jesus. Now, these three things, often in our Christian walk, we're good at maybe one or two of them and then struggle with one or two of them, but we've really got to strive for all three. We need to live a holy, loving, good, and decent life. So, you can think of these three, and if you don't do all three, how your life is just not compelling. Even if you have the other two, is just not compelling. So the first one, holiness, is that process of becoming more and more like God, right? In believing in Jesus, believing in the truth, and then actually living the Christian ethic, not changing the thing with the times. Now, if you don't live a holy life, the reason why it's not compelling is, who cares, right? I'm reading this great book called Good Faith right now, and it's a bunch of statistics and about what's going on in faith. And one of the reasons that people often don't come to faith in Jesus who are outside of the faith is they look at our faith and they go, I'm basically living the exact same life as a Christian. Why do I need to tack on the rest of that stuff? Right? Because a lot of Christians, they just don't live holy lives. Or they take the Christian ethic and they just constantly change it to keep up with the times. And when you do that, your faith, it becomes completely irrelevant. I mean, just who cares? If you're not living set apart, if you're not living a holy life, if you're not living that holy life that's different than the world around you, than the culture around you, then why should anyone respect that? Why should anyone care? Why should anyone be compelled to see that you're living differently when you're not? So if you just change the things you believe and change the way that Jesus called you to believe, to fit in with the times, fit in with your culture, to fit in with the way the people around you think and act, and who cares? You'll become completely irrelevant. And that is what we've seen today in faith statistics. The denominations across the country that have given up on holiness, that kind of just changed the Christian ethic to go with the times, don't care about holiness, are rapidly dying because it's completely irrelevant, right? So holiness, loving others, and goodness. Now, if you don't love others, who cares, right? There's nothing compelling. You can live a holy life and a good life. But if you don't go out and love others, people don't pay attention. Okay? So a few weeks ago, I was talking to an old friend, and he knows I'm a pastor, so he didn't lay it on too thick, but he kind of said, the church really should be up, and what the church should really be up to right now is helping the poor. And he really felt like maybe the church wasn't, and that we weren't loving others. Now, our church loves others, and so I got to tell him a couple stories about how we have teams of people taking food out and driving it to families without transportation because they're living in poverty and don't have a way to even go get food or to buy it, even if they were there. I got to tell him a story of our church bringing dozens of bags of food to a place by this school where all this food is given away in our community. And so he's like, oh, yeah, okay. So he went from kind of gently cynical and criticizing faith to saying, okay, I can respect that, right? And that's what Paul's talking about. So your daily life may win the respect of outsiders. You see, if you're holy and good, but if you're not loving, no one's going to notice. You got to get out there and love others and sacrifice for others for your faith to be respected by outsiders, to be noticed by outsiders. Okay? So, live a life that's holy, loving, and then good. Just be decent. He said, be peaceful, mind your own business, get down to work. Last year, Pastor Jeremy, our family pastor, and I, we went to this conference in California. And one day we played a little hooky for one of the sessions, which due to LA traffic became like 3 of the sessions. And we tried to drive to Hollywood. And we made it, but not for long because it took so long to get there. But we're walking down Hollywood Boulevard, and there was a group of Christians, which pains me even to say that they were. I don't know. But they had these huge signs. And they were just screaming. I think, if I'm remembering, one of them even had a megaphone. They're like on this corner, and there's thousands of people passing by on Hollywood Boulevard. They're yelling about God's judgment. And we stepped back because they were like, it just, if you look at each one of those signs, most of their signs were actually true. But the way they were saying it was so going out of their way to disrupt peace, and so not minding their own business, and it was so without relationship and without love, that it was actually accomplishing the very opposite thing. And we can do the same thing. People, when we're not good, when we're not just good, decent people, people cannot see Jesus through our signs, right? I don't know what our sign, but we all want a metaphor. Hopefully you don't go out to street corners and hold up hateful signs and judgmental signs, but there's a metaphorical sign that we can all hold above our head. And if we lead with it about God's judgment before we talk to people about God's love, before we're out there loving others and living a decent life, they know nothing about us, and we're just leading with that sign of judgment, people can't see through our sign. They can't see Jesus through our sign. No, because we're not being decent. We're not being good. As Paul says here, we're not being peaceful. We're not minding our own business. We're not living a quiet life. We can't do that. That's just not decent. It's not going to help people find Jesus. Okay? So, as he asks in chapter 4, verse 1, how to live. How do we live? Okay? If we can live, how to live. If we can live holy, loving, good lives, we can compel outsiders they become insiders to the faith, right? If we can do all three of these things, others will respect our faith. They'll respect it. They'll see it. And they'll be compelled to join it, right? Why should you live a holy, loving, and good life so that your daily life may win the respect of outsiders? Thanks for being here. God bless.